You're exhausted, buried in tasks, drowning in notifications, hustling non-stop. Yet your best work feels buried under the busyness, and burnout is creeping in. What if the real secret to becoming dangerously productive, producing legendary results that last, is to stop speeding up and start slowing down? In Cal Newport's breakthrough book, Slow-Productivity, he dismantles the myth of constant hustle. We're stuck in pseudo-productivity, looking busy while achieving little that matters. The antidote? Do fewer things. Work at a natural pace. Obsess over quality. This isn't laziness. It's sustainable excellence. How masters create work that endures without crashing. Chapter 1. The Rise and Fall of Pseudo-Productivity. Knowledge work, writing, coding, designing strategies, researching, teaching, or any job centered on thinking and creating ideas, has a fundamental problem. There's no obvious way to measure real productivity. In a factory, you can count widgets per hour or bushels per day. Output is visible and quantifiable. But in knowledge work, the value often emerges slowly, over weeks, months, or even years. A breakthrough idea, a well-crafted report, or a game-changing strategy doesn't show up on a daily tally sheet. Because of this uncertainty, organizations and managers needed a stand-in. They turned to something simple and observable, visible activity. If you're constantly sending emails, replying instantly, joining meetings, updating statuses, or just appearing busy, online or in the office, then surely you're being productive. This is what Cal Newport calls pseudo-productivity, using visible busyness as a crude proxy for actual productive effort. It's not about meaningful results. It's about the performance of effort. This approach took root in the mid-20th century as knowledge work grew rapidly. Managers borrowed from industrial era logic, where more hours and motion equaled more output. In cognitive work, though, more motion often crowds out deep thinking. Digital tools then turbocharged the problem. Email, instant messaging, Slack, smartphones, and constant connectivity made it effortless to stay visible around the clock. You can demonstrate effort anytime, pinging colleagues at midnight, firing off quick replies, stacking endless coordination. Adding new tasks or commitments became frictionless, but each one carries an overhead tax. Back and forth messages, scheduling, status updates, context switching, and administrative drag. These demands compound quickly. The more tasks you juggle at once, the higher the overhead tax climbs. With only so many hours in a day, the tax eats into time for core, high-value work. The deep thinking, writing, problem-solving that actually creates impact. Small, low-value activities become productivity termites, gnawing away at your capacity for what matters most. Push too hard, and you're left in a whirlwind of frantic motion with little real progress. The pandemic exposed this trap even more starkly. Remote work stripped away physical presence, so people leaned harder on digital signals, constant availability, rapid responses, to prove they were working. Parents balanced Zoom calls with childcare and homeschooling, yet the expectation stayed the same: deliver the same output amid chaos. Burnout surged because pseudo-productivity isn't just inefficient, it's exhausting and often dehumanizing. It rewards looking busy over thoughtful creation, turning meaningful work into a game of appearances. This isn't an inevitable feature of knowledge work. It's a side effect of outdated, crude evaluation methods born from uncertainty. But those methods have outlived their usefulness. They drive stress, shallow output, dissatisfaction, and widespread exhaustion, exactly the opposite of what high-impact knowledge work demands. The good news? People are waking up to it. The great resignation, quiet quitting, the rise of anti-hustle conversations, all signal a rejection of performative busyness. True productivity in knowledge work is often invisible in the short term, but profound over time. Escaping pseudo-productivity means letting go of the illusion that constant motion equals accomplishment and embracing something more intentional and sustainable. A focus on quality results over endless activity. This shift opens the door to real accomplishment without the burnout. It's the starting point for rethinking how we work in a way that's humane, effective, and built to last. Chapter 2. A slower alternative. The old way of working, constant urgency, overloading your plate, staying visibly busy at all hours, isn't working anymore. It leaves people drained, shallow in their output, and quietly miserable. The way out isn't to fight or complain about it endlessly. It's to build something better, an approach so appealing, so much more satisfying, that the frantic, overloaded style starts to look crude and outdated by comparison. Think of what happened with food in the 1980s. When fast food chains spread aggressively, threatening local traditions and quality, the response wasn't just protest. A new movement emerged that celebrated the opposite. Slow, careful preparation, seasonal ingredients, meals shared with attention and enjoyment. By making the slower way richer and more human, it made rushing through cheap, mass-produced food feel empty and undesirable. That idea spread far beyond food, into cities, medicine, education, showing that deliberate slowness could be more attractive than speed. The same logic applies to knowledge work. The dominant style today is fast and overloaded. More tasks, quicker replies, endless coordination, always-on availability. It feels productive in the moment, but it often produces mediocre results and burns people out. A more powerful response is to offer a compelling alternative. Slow productivity, a way of organizing intellectual work that is sustainable, meaningful, and capable of producing real excellence. This alternative rests on 3 interlocking principles. First, do fewer things. Cut obligations ruthlessly. By taking on significantly less, you free up real attention and energy for what actually matters. Important projects stop competing for scraps of time. They get the space they need to breathe and develop properly. Fewer commitments mean less administrative drag, less context switching, and far more capacity for deep, focused effort. Second, work at a natural pace. Stop forcing big, meaningful work into artificial deadlines or constant sprint mode. Allow important projects to unfold over realistic timelines, sometimes intense bursts, sometimes slower, reflective periods. Grand achievements rarely come from relentless acceleration. They come from patient, steady accumulation of small advances over long stretches of time. Respect the natural rhythm that quality demands instead of artificially speeding everything up. Third, obsess over quality. Make the pursuit of impressive, lasting excellence the central organizing principle of your work. When the goal is to produce something remarkable, something that stands out and endures, then busyness, volume, and speed lose their appeal. High standards naturally push you to protect time, eliminate distractions, and focus on craft. Quality becomes the filter that decides what deserves your attention and what doesn't. This isn't about doing less because you're lazy or unambitious. It's about doing less so you can do what matters far better and sustain it for years without collapsing. When work is organized around depth, care, and real impact instead of motion and urgency, it stops feeling like a draining treadmill and starts feeling like a source of pride and meaning. The strength of this approach is its positivity. It doesn't need to attack the old way directly. It simply demonstrates a richer, more human alternative. Once people experience the clarity, satisfaction, and actual results that come from fewer things, natural pacing, and obsessive quality, the overloaded, always-on style begins to feel hollow and unnecessary. This shift isn't just personal, it's cultural. When more people embrace deliberate slowness for the sake of real accomplishment, the default of frantic busyness starts to lose its grip. Work becomes something worth doing well, not something to survive. In the deepest, most valuable contributions, the ones that actually move the needle, emerge not from speed, but from sustained, intentional effort. Slowing down intentionally becomes the fastest way to meaningful progress. Chapter 3. Do fewer things. The first principle of meaningful productivity is deceptively simple yet radically powerful. Do fewer things. Most people overload their lives with too many commitments. They say yes to new projects, side tasks, requests, meetings, and opportunities because each one seems reasonable or important on its own. But when you add them all together, the combined weight becomes crushing. Every extra obligation brings not just the work itself, but also coordination, communication, follow-ups, context switching, and mental overhead. The more things you carry simultaneously, the more this invisible tax consumes your time and attention, leaving almost nothing left for the few things that could actually produce real impact. The solution isn't to work harder or manage time better. It's to reduce the number of things you're actively working on at any given moment, dramatically, by taking on significantly fewer active projects. You create breathing room. Important work no longer has to fight for tiny fragments of focus scattered between dozens of other tasks. Instead, the handful of things that truly matter get sustained attention, consistent progress, and the mental space required to think deeply and execute well. This isn't about doing nothing or abandoning ambition. It's about selective intensity. When you commit to far fewer things, you can pour real energy into them. You stop spreading yourself thin across a dozen half-finished efforts and start moving a small number of meaningful projects forward with clarity and momentum. Progress feels tangible instead of frantic. Results compound because you're actually finishing what matters instead of perpetually starting new things. There's a natural resistance to this idea. Cutting back feels risky. Opportunities might slip away. People might think you're not pulling your weight, or you might miss out on something exciting. But the evidence from long-term high performers tells a different story. The people who produce the most impressive, enduring work over decades are often the ones who say no most aggressively. They protect their capacity by keeping their active load small. They understand that saying no to good things is the price of saying yes to great things. Practically, this means building deliberate filters. Regularly review everything on your plate and ask, is this one of the few things that will move the needle in a way that aligns with what I value most? If not, can it be paused, delegated, declined, or eliminated? The goal is to keep only a small number of high-leverage efforts active at once, often just one or two major projects, while everything else waits or disappears. When you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. The administrative drag shrinks. Emails, meetings, and status updates drop sharply because there are fewer threads to manage. Context switching becomes rare, so your mind stays sharper and your work gets deeper. Burnout fades because you're no longer running on fumes trying to juggle an impossible load. And most importantly, the quality and impact of what you produce go up, sometimes dramatically, because real attention and care can finally reach the work that deserves it. Doing fewer things is the foundation. It's the prerequisite that makes the other principles possible. Without it, natural pacing feels impossible and obsessive quality remains out of reach. But when you ruthlessly reduce the volume of what's on your plate, you unlock the conditions for thoughtful, sustainable, high-value accomplishment. Fewer becomes the path to far more, not less. Chapter 4. Work at a natural pace. The next principle of meaningful productivity is this: work at a natural pace. Most people treat important work like it's a race against the clock, cramming it into tight deadlines, forcing constant high energy, pushing through exhaustion because slowing down feels like failure or laziness. But this relentless urgency is artificial. It's not how groundbreaking ideas, art, discoveries, or lasting achievements have historically emerged. When you look at the people who changed the world, scientists, artists, thinkers, they rarely worked in a flat, unbroken sprint. Their efforts unfolded unevenly over long stretches, with periods of intense focus mixed with reflection, rest, detours, and even seeming delays. The pace varied because brilliance needs room to breathe, to simmer, to connect unexpected dots. Rushing it often produces shallow results. Allowing it to follow a more organic rhythm unlocks depth and endurance. Consider the early scientists who built modern knowledge. One thinker, sparked by a text in his early 20s, didn't rush to publish. He drafted ideas for friends, then waited decades before sharing them broadly. Another collected meticulous observations on a comet, but took over a decade to fully analyze and release them. A physicist timed pendulums in his youth, but didn't pursue the follow-up experiments for nearly 2 decades. Even someone on the verge of isolating a revolutionary element paused for an extended countryside vacation with family, climbing hills, visiting grottos, bathing in rivers, right when the breakthrough was within reach. These weren't lazy, they were deliberate. They prioritized the long view. What mattered was the lifetime contribution, not daily busyness. Without managers demanding instant output or clients chasing emails, they let work develop at the speed it required. They embraced variation, intense phases balanced by recovery, exploration, or simply living fully. This natural variation echoes something deeper in human history. For most of our existence, hundreds of thousands of years, people lived as hunters and gatherers. Work wasn't monotonous 9-to-5 grind. It had spikes and lulls, long hunts followed by rests, fishing with ups and downs, days of effort interspersed with naps or waiting out weather. Modern studies of remaining foraging communities show they spent far less time on work than farmers or industrial laborers, often half the daylight hours in leisure, and their effort was uneven, not constant. Agriculture changed that around 12,000 years ago, turning work into steady, repetitive toil from dawn to dusk during planting and harvest, offset only by seasonal winters. Industrialization erased even those offsets. Factories ran every day like harvest time, creating unvarying monotony. Knowledge work inherited this. Pseudo-productivity made it worse by demanding visible activity all the time, colonizing evenings, weekends, vacations, with no built-in relief. The result is estrangement. We feel alienated from rhythms our bodies and minds evolved for. The alternative is to reclaim a natural pace for what matters most. Don't force every major project into artificial speed. Let it unfold over sustainable timelines, with intensity that rises and falls, in environments that spark insight. This isn't procrastination. It's respect for how creativity and excellence actually develop. Here are practical ways to make it real. Start by expanding your horizons. Create a multi-year vision. Most planning stays short, months or quarters, leading to frantic short-term scrambles. But zoom out to 5 years, or whatever fits your life. Map what you want to achieve over that span. Books written, skills mastered, impact built. This long view gives breathing room. You can tolerate busy seasons where other demands dominate because the big picture keeps you returning to what counts. Progress becomes steady accumulation, not constant pressure. When gaps appear, months without visible advances, you see them as exploration or incubation, not failure. At the seasonal scale, double your timelines. When estimating how long a project or milestone needs, take your first reasonable guess and double it. If 2 weeks feels right for a launch, plan for a month. If 4 chapters in a season sounds doable, aim for 2. We're terrible at estimating cognitive work. Wired for physical tasks, we default to optimistic best-case scenarios that feel exciting in planning but lead to burnout in execution. Doubling counters that bias, creating plans you can meet at a calm, consistent rhythm. Grand results come from modest daily advances over time, not heroic sprints. On the daily level, simplify ruthlessly. Reduce your task list by 25 to 50% from what first comes to mind. Again, to fight optimism bias. Limit meetings or calls to no more than half your day. Protect blocks. Declare no meeting days, like Mondays, for gentle re-entry. Or use a one for you, one for me rule. Every added appointment gets an equal protected slot. These aren't rigid rules for every day. Peaks happen, but as defaults, they ensure intense periods are followed by recovery, preventing chronic overload. Embrace seasonality more broadly. Big breaks matter. Extended retreats, sabbatical-like pauses, or quiet seasons where you step back dramatically. But small seasonality works too. No meetings on a fixed day each week, a monthly weekday afternoon escape, matinee, museum, hike, something novel to reset your mind. Scheduling rest projects after hard efforts, watch films, learn hobbies, play, or cycles of focused bursts followed by cool-downs for recharge and reflection. Variation prevents monotony from draining you. Peaks feel energizing when troughs follow. Forgive slips. Timing is tricky. Projects drag. Inspiration fades. Procrastination sneaks in. Reacting with crushing busyness as penance just restarts the cycle. Instead, forgive yourself. Ask, what's next? And keep returning. The key is persistence across years, not perfection every stretch. Finally, work poetically. Shape the context. Surroundings and rituals transform perception. Long walks in nature, specific routines. Coffee, then bath, then countryside drive. Sugar rush in a diner. Chopping wood before studio. These shift mental states, making time feel expansive and receptive. Personalize them. Make them striking enough to pull you from anxiety into flow. When context supports brilliance, pace feels natural, not forced. Working at a natural pace isn't slowing for its own sake. It's aligning effort with how real accomplishment happens. Patient, variable, contextual, sustainable. It rejects homogenized urgency for rhythms that sustain long careers and deep results. When you give work the time, variation, and setting it deserves, you don't lose momentum. You gain the conditions for something extraordinary to emerge. Slowing intentionally becomes the path to lasting impact. Chapter 5. Obsess over quality. The third and culminating principle is this: obsess over quality. Everything comes back to one central choice. Make the pursuit of remarkable, enduring excellence the organizing force of your professional life. Not volume, not speed, not visibility, not even balance alone. When the goal shifts to producing work that is genuinely impressive, work that stands out, endures, and matters long after it's created, almost every other decision follows naturally. Busyness loses its appeal. Overload becomes intolerable. Rushing feels reckless. The frantic, pseudo-productive style that dominates so much knowledge work starts to look not just inefficient, but actually counterproductive to the very thing you care about most. Why does this shift matter so much? Because quality is the ultimate leverage in intellectual work. A single piece of exceptional output, a book that reshapes thinking, a design that changes behavior, a scientific insight that opens new fields, a strategy that transforms an organization, can outweigh years of average, hurried effort. The people who leave the deepest mark over decades are rarely the ones who produce the most. They're the ones who produce the best. When quality becomes the filter, you stop asking, "How much can I get done?" and start asking, "What can I create that is truly worth doing?" That question changes everything. This obsession isn't vague or aspirational. It's concrete and demanding. It requires you to become discriminating, to judge your own work against high standards, to seek feedback that exposes weaknesses, to study masters in your field, not just to imitate, but to understand what makes their output exceptional. It means investing time in craft, revising, refining, experimenting, discarding, when it would be easier to ship something good enough. It means saying no to opportunities that are merely profitable or prestigious if they dilute your ability to produce something remarkable. It means treating mediocrity as the real enemy, not exhaustion or criticism. Look at how this played out historically. One artist spent years perfecting a single major work, producing relatively little in volume but creating pieces that still define the era. Another thinker published sparingly, sometimes only a handful of major contributions across a lifetime, yet each one shifted entire disciplines because the ideas were honed to razor sharpness. A writer produced a small number of books, but labored over each sentence until it carried maximum clarity and force. These creators didn't chase output metrics. They chased something harder and rarer. Work so good it compelled attention and respect long after they were gone. Their careers prove that obsessive quality scales differently. It compounds. One excellent project builds reputation, opens doors, attracts better opportunities, and gives you more leverage to protect time for the next excellent project. Practically, this principle shows up in several powerful ways. First, it gives you permission, and even obligation, to protect time ferociously. When the goal is excellence, you can't afford constant fragmentation. You need long, uninterrupted stretches to think deeply, iterate, and polish. That means declining meetings, delaying responses, batching administrative work, and saying no to requests that would pull you away from the core craft. The higher the quality bar, the more ruthless the protection must be. Second, it naturally reinforces doing fewer things. You can't obsess over quality if you're juggling 10 active projects. A handful, or even just 1 or 2, major efforts allow you to go deep enough to reach excellence. When quality is the priority, the argument for fewer commitments becomes unassailable. Spreading yourself across too much guarantees mediocrity everywhere. Third, it aligns perfectly with natural pacing. Excellence rarely arrives on a forced schedule. A breakthrough insight, a perfectly structured argument, a resonant design, these often require incubation, false starts, reflection, and multiple revisions. Obsessing over quality means giving work the time it needs, accepting that some seasons will be slower, and trusting that the result will be worth the wait. Deadlines become tools, not tyrants. They serve the work instead of dictating it. Fourth, it changes how you measure success. Instead of counting tasks completed, emails sent, or hours logged, you evaluate progress by asking, is this moving towards something impressive? Is the current version noticeably better than the last? Are we getting closer to work that could stand alongside the best in the field? These questions keep you focused on substance over activity. Finally, it creates a virtuous cycle. When you consistently produce high-quality work, reputation grows. People begin to seek you out for your craft rather than your availability. You gain more autonomy, more control over your schedule, more ability to choose projects, more leverage to say no. That autonomy feeds back into quality. With fewer distractions and more protected time, you can go even deeper. The cycle strengthens over years, turning a focus on excellence into a sustainable, compounding advantage. This obsession isn't comfortable. It demands discomfort, rejecting quick wins, enduring criticism, revising when you'd rather move on, admitting when something isn't good enough. But it also brings a rare satisfaction. The knowledge that what you're creating has real weight, that it's worth the effort, that it might matter beyond the immediate moment. When all 3 principles come together, doing fewer things, working at a natural pace, and obsessing over quality, they form a coherent, powerful system. Fewer commitments create the space. Natural pacing provides the rhythm. Obsessive quality gives the direction and the meaning. Together, they replace the exhausting treadmill of pseudo-productivity with something far more human and far more effective. A way of working that produces meaningful accomplishment without requiring you to sacrifice health, relationships, or joy. The deepest insight is this: slowing down intentionally, choosing depth over frenzy, and holding yourself to a high standard isn't a retreat from ambition. It's the most ambitious path available. It's how lasting impact is actually made. When you obsess over quality, you don't just work differently. You redefine what productive work can be. Chapter 6. Putting principles into practice. Now that the 3 principles, do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality, are clear, the real question becomes, how do you actually make this work in the real world? Most knowledge workers don't have the luxury of a cabin in the woods, unlimited autonomy, or 0 external demands. You have a job, deadlines, colleagues, clients, a family, an inbox that never sleeps. The principles aren't a fantasy. They are designed to be applied inside the constraints of ordinary professional life. The key is to start small, protect what matters most, and let the system build itself over time. Begin with a foundation. Shrink your active obligations. Look at everything currently on your plate. Projects, recurring tasks, side commitments, even informal promises. Be brutally honest. How many of these are truly high leverage? How many would still matter in 2 or 3 years? Most people discover that only a small fraction, often 1 to 3 major efforts, actually drive meaningful progress toward their long-term goals or values. Everything else is either maintenance, someone else's priority, or shiny distraction. The practical move is to declare a slow season reset. Pick a realistic window, 3 to 6 months, and commit to dramatically reducing what's active. Politely decline new requests. Pause or delegate what can wait. Renegotiate timelines on anything that's not critical. The goal isn't perfection. It's to get your active load down to a number you can realistically advance without constant panic. When that number is small, the overhead tax collapses. Fewer emails, fewer meetings, fewer context switches. Suddenly you have hours each day that used to vanish into coordination. Next, protect deep work blocks like they're sacred. Quality and natural pacing both demand long, uninterrupted stretches. Experiment to find what works in your life. 90 minutes each morning before anyone else is awake. 2 half-day sessions a week with your phone in another room, or full no-meeting days. Communicate these boundaries clearly. Tell colleagues, I'm heads down on core work Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I'll respond fully by end of day. Most people respect protected time once they understand it produces better results. Use the double your timeline rule religiously. When a project feels important, estimate how long it will realistically take, then double it. If the doubled version still fits your calendar without heroic effort, proceed. If not, renegotiate scope or deadline. This simple habit kills artificial urgency and gives the work room to breathe, revise, and improve. Exactly what quality requires. Build in seasonal variation to avoid chronic depletion. Alternate focused sprints with deliberate slowdowns. After finishing a major deliverable, schedule a lighter week. Catch up on reading, take longer walks, do low-stakes creative play, or simply rest. Monthly, carve out one reset afternoon. No laptop, no agenda, just something that feeds your mind differently. A museum, a hike, a long coffee with a notebook. These aren't indulgences. They're maintenance for sustained high performance. When resistance shows up, someone pushes for faster delivery, a shiny new opportunity tempts you, or guilt creeps in for not being busy enough. Return to the quality filter. Ask, will rushing this make the output better or worse? Will saying yes to this dilute my ability to produce something remarkable? If the answer is worse or dilute, the decision becomes clear. Over time, this habit rewires how others see you, not as unavailable, but as someone who delivers exceptional work when it counts. Track progress not by tasks checked off, but by small quality markers. Did today's writing get noticeably sharper? Did this draft eliminate a major flaw? Is the argument stronger than last week? These micro-improvements compound. They also remind you why you're doing this. Not to look productive, but to create something worth creating. Expect friction at first. Colleagues might misinterpret your slower cadence as disengagement. Your own brain, conditioned to hustle, might itch for more activity. Push through by reminding yourself the old way left you exhausted and shallow. This way produces work you're proud of and a life you don't need to recover from. After 6 to 12 months of consistent practice, the benefits stack. Reputation improves. People start valuing your output over your availability. Autonomy grows. You get more leeway to shape your schedule. Burnout fades because you're no longer running on empty. Most importantly, work stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like craft. You finish projects not just done, but done well. Sometimes extraordinarily well. This isn't about becoming a monk or rejecting the modern world. It's about bringing intention back into how you spend your finite attention and energy. Start where you are. Cut one thing, protect one block, extend one timeline. Each small choice reinforces the others. Over time, the 3 principles stop being abstract ideas and become the default way you work. When fewer things get real attention, paced naturally, and aimed at genuine excellence, you don't lose productivity, you reclaim it in its most powerful form. Conclusion to the book. After laying out the 3 core principles, doing fewer things, working at a natural pace and obsessing over quality, the argument reaches its natural end point. These ideas are not isolated tactics. They form a coherent, mutually reinforcing system that can replace the exhausting, pseudo-productive way of working that dominates knowledge work today. When you combine them deliberately, the effect is transformative. Doing fewer things creates the necessary space and attention bandwidth. Working at a natural pace provides sustainable rhythm and prevents artificial pressure from distorting the quality of what you produce. Obsessing over quality gives clear direction and meaning, turning effort into something purposeful instead of endless busyness. Together, these 3 principles don't just reduce stress. They actively generate deeper satisfaction, higher impact, and longer-term professional success. The conclusion emphasizes that this shift is realistic and achievable, even in demanding modern environments. It doesn't require you to quit your job, become a hermit, or reject ambition. It requires only a change in priorities, moving from quantity and visibility toward depth, care, and excellence. Many people already live versions of this approach. Artists who produce a handful of powerful works over decades. Researchers who publish infrequently but influentially. Writers who take years to finish books that endure. Their careers show that slow productivity is not a fringe idea. It is how much of the most valuable human contribution has always happened. What makes the approach newly urgent is the current context. The digital tools and cultural norms that amplified pseudo-productivity have reached a breaking point. Constant connectivity, infinite inboxes, collaborative software, and the expectation of instant responsiveness have turned overload into the default. Burnout is widespread. Dissatisfaction is rising. People are quietly, and sometimes loudly, looking for alternatives. The 3 principles offer exactly that. A positive, practical vision that makes the old way feel increasingly hollow by comparison. Implementing slow productivity is gradual and personal. You start small, perhaps by declining one low-value commitment, extending a timeline on something important, or carving out a protected block each week for deep craft. Each step reinforces the others. Fewer tasks make natural pacing easier. Natural pacing protects quality. Higher quality builds confidence to say no more often. Over months and years, the changes compound. Work stops feeling like a treadmill and starts feeling like a craft worth mastering. The deepest payoff is not just productivity in the narrow sense. It's a reclamation of meaning. When your effort is focused on a small number of things that matter, paced in a way that respects how your mind actually works, and aimed at genuine excellence, professional life becomes something you can take pride in, not something you endure or escape from. You gain the rare combination of real accomplishment and a life that still includes rest, relationships, curiosity, and joy. The conclusion leaves you with a clear invitation. The old model of productivity is failing more people every day. A slower, more intentional alternative is not only possible, it is more effective for the kind of work that actually changes things. By choosing fewer things, respecting natural rhythms, and holding yourself to a high standard of quality, you don't give up ambition. You redirect it toward what lasts. Slowing down deliberately becomes the most powerful way to speed up meaningful progress. The lost art of accomplishment without burnout isn't lost forever. It's waiting to be reclaimed, one thoughtful choice at a time.